If decisions about another war are to be taken anywhere, they will surely be taken here and now in Newport. More than 60 presidents and prime ministers have gathered for the summit of the most powerful military alliance in the world. NATO's leaders came here expecting to mark the end of a conflict, the withdrawal of Western troops from Afghanistan.
You put your lives on the line. You fight so that others can be safe, so that those who resort to terror and violence will not succeed.
But the leaders gathered in Wales are absorbed instead by what to do about two new conflicts, one to the east pitting Russia against Ukraine, another to the south, thanks to the mounting threat of the so-called Islamic State.
Surrounded by an arc of crisis, our alliance, our transatlantic community, represents an island of security, stability, and prosperity.
What has brought the violence much closer to home is the brutal beheading of two American journalists and the chilling threat that this man, British aid worker David Haines, could be next. A father of two from Perth, he was kidnapped in Syria last March.
Good to see you. Where am I sitting? Is that my seat?
Barack Obama and David Cameron say the fight against IS is a struggle which could last until these children grow up and have children of their own. The Prime Minister said today that military action against Iraq and Syria would not just be moral, it would be legal. But he says it would form part of a wider strategy.
What is required is not some Western intervention that leaves others in the region to pick up the pieces. What is required is action on the ground from the Kurds, from a new Iraqi government, from the neighbouring states, all that pressure being applied. And then, yes, of course, there is a role that countries like Britain and America and others can play.
In the short term, that means Britain will arm the Kurdish Peshmerga, as well as providing those threatened by IS with humanitarian aid. In the longer term, it may mean British Tornado fighters joining US Air Force attacks on the Islamic State, just as they were used 3 years ago to attack Colonel Gaddafi's supporters in Libya. In truth, of course, any decision by the man on the right will only come when the man on the left makes up his mind what to do. What makes the US president popular with some, his reputation for cool analysis, seems to others more like an excuse for paralysis.
The people of Newport are delighted that the presidential motorcade's rolling into town, but the question facing President Obama from the world is whether he's come with the strategy for confronting Islamic State, which only last week he admitted he hadn't got.
Meanwhile, as Western leaders talked, Ukraine is still burning. NATO says that Russia has fueled this conflict, sending in not just weapons, but her own troops. Ukraine's President Poroshenko won more support today, but the West will fight Russia not with weapons, but with a fresh round of sanctions on state-owned defence and energy companies and those dubbed Putin's cronies.
They say warfare!
Outside the summit, beyond the security barrier, a few hundred protested against the prospect of more war. Watch this space, because the leaders of NATO's 28 countries who gathered at Cardiff Castle tonight believe it is Russia and the so-called Islamic State who have made conflict unavoidable. Nick Robinson, BBC News, at the NATO summit.